Good morning, bom dia. Welcome to A Place in the Sun Live's digital event, and today is our Portugal property masterclass. We have a series of 6 webinars today, and we're going to look at all aspects of buying and owning a property in Portugal. And where we're going to kick off is with finance and mortgage availability, and I'm very pleased to be joined by a couple of people who know a lot more about this than I do. So let me introduce them to you first. And first of all, Christina, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm fine. And who are you and what do you do?
I'm Christina. I'm the mortgage broker for Ideal Homes. I've been there for 6 years. I'm originally from South Africa, but my family's from Portugal, from Lisbon and Porto. I made the move over 15 years ago, and yeah, I've never looked back.
And as a mortgage broker within an estate agency, Ideal Homes is an estate agent, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and that's a world you know, Chris Garvey from Chesterton's, Portugal.
Indeed. Good morning, Andy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Chris. So tell us a little bit about Chesterton's and what do you do?
We're the franchise of Chesterton's in the UK. We have offices across the Algarve and in Porto. We have both in-house and refer clients who need mortgages and financial help to a couple of preferred brokers, as well as dealing with some of the local banks. So we can offer across the board depending on people's requirements on the mortgage front. Okay,
so I am going to put myself in the shoes of somebody who knows nothing about Portuguese mortgages, and that's not too difficult for me to do. And to all our lovely audience out there today, if you would like to ask any questions, put them to our panelists, Chris and Christina. You will see a Q&A button either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on your device. So feel free to send over your questions and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can. So Chris, when British buyers come to you, typically, do they, what sort of percentage are looking for finance and how many people are cash buyers? Do you often deal with this mortgage question?
Yes, we find that probably more than 50% need to raise finance or additional finance. Often people will have some money through an inheritance or selling a business or something like that, and they need to top it up. And so there are various ways of doing that. Equity release is one, obviously, putting an additional charge on the property in the UK against a property in Portugal. It depends on how the clients see the future and their financial situation. The process has to be very flexible because we're all different and we all have different requirements on that. So.
Okay. And Christina, why does it make sense to look at a Portuguese lender? I guess you're providing Portugal-based mortgage products principally, yeah?
Correct, yeah. So what we do is we work with all the banks in Portugal. And the reason why a lot of people want finance is because it's an easy process. So the banks, we've got a bank that finances 80%, meaning you only need 20% deposit, and the interest rates are so low. So the interest rates at the moment is around 1.1%. So it's you know, it's a no-brainer really. 80% finance with an interest rate of 1.1%. It's, you know, it's quite easy.
And which just reel off a number of banks that are sort of offering product that are happy to lend to British buyers at the moment.
All the banks in Portugal. So we work with all of them. So if you've only got 30% deposit, if you've got 30% deposits, we send the application to all the banks. There's no fee involved for that. It's the reason why we do that is because we can get a comparison. So we send it to all the banks come back with an approval, and we compare them and see which bank offers you the best interest rates and terms and conditions.
Okay, and is that a similar sort of process with yourselves, Chris, when you're dealing with British buyers? You're referring them out to a brokerage?
Yes, and you know the banks are keen to lend if the client has the right profile, and for the buyers, as Christina was saying, you know, it's the 1 to 1.5% range. People can afford to buy, and with the rental income, can service that mortgage relatively easily. So it becomes quite a painless ownership cycle, and that people like that, because what they don't want is to have to worry about the ongoing cost of servicing a mortgage on their holiday property.
Okay, well, let's pick up on that in a bit more detail. So in terms of proof of income to service that mortgage, you're saying you could use rental income from the property?
No, but you could use it to pay it. The bank won't take that normally into consideration.
Okay.
Even commercial, if you had a commercial investment, they wouldn't here in Portugal. You have to therefore prove that you can service it in the UK or wherever you're from. But obviously, once you're getting the rental income, you can do.
Okay. And what other sort of criteria, Christina, are involved in assessing somebody for the likelihood of getting a mortgage from a Portuguese bank?
So the way the banks work it out is they take any credit that you got or any loans, like existing mortgages, car loans, personal loans. They take those loans, including the finance in Portugal, cannot exceed 35% of your income. So even in a situation where it's a bit more difficult, because the bank requires 3 months pay slips and bank statements. So if it is a situation that's a bit more difficult, we can guide you into the right way to get the mortgage. So we'll help you and give it 3 months until we can do that.
Okay. And why would somebody come and use your services rather than trying to access this sort of thing, these sorts of products by themselves?
Because it can be time consuming for yourself. What we do is, like I said, we work with all the banks. So once we get the application, we work to all the banks. We do the translation for you. We negotiate with the banks. So we'll go to one bank and say, look, the other bank's offering 1.2%. What can you do? So we fight for you. We make sure that you get the best there is.
Okay. And without getting into necessarily exactly what you charge, are you a fee-based service, or is it a commission from the lender? How does it work? And at what point do people need to pay you something to do the exploration for them?
You don't. It's a service that Ideal Homes offer to our clients.
Okay. Okay. And Chris, if somebody's thinking of getting a mortgage, is it something that they should be looking at early on in the process, or when do you suggest they pick up and focus on this as a step in the chain?
I think we normally recommend to clients to run the two things concurrently. Have a look around to try and define the search areas that you're interested in terms of property, and then initiate the requests for the banks. As Christina says, there are no upfront costs. We don't charge either. It's part of our service. We want to sell the property, and if helping with the mortgage makes that easier, that's what we'll do. And so run the two things concurrently. You'll start getting the feedback from the bank, knowing the sort of limits they'll impose on you in terms of how much they'll lend and so on. And that then helps also knowing the type of property you can go for. It's no good hoping to buy £1 million property if the bank's only going to give you 100 grand. So you have to be slightly realistic on that, and the feedback from the bank does help on that.
Absolutely. Christina, some questions coming in. Can I just ask the audience, it's better to put the questions in the Q&A rather than the chat. It's just easier for us to see them all in the Q&A rather than the chat, but we'll try and answer those that you have put in the chat. Christina, self-employed income, I guess that's treated the same way as employed income, is it?
Yeah, it's the same.
Okay.
The only other requirement would be the business details, so bank statements and tax returns.
Okay. And what about buyers from further afield than the UK? We've got an inquiry here from Samuel Matthew, clients from the USA, somebody else in Brazil. What sort of, I guess, is there any difference for different nationalities?
No, there's no difference at all. As long as you've got the affordability, there's no difference at all.
Okay. And typically, let's talk a bit about the term then, the term of the mortgage. And in the UK, we're used to signing up to a deal for 2 or 3 years, and then you renew it or you default to a standard rate. Is that how it works in Portugal, or is it different to that, Christina?
So we've got the bank that finances 80% will finance up to the age of 80 years old. So they'll always go by the oldest candidates, but it's also for a maximum of 40 years. The other banks, it's up to the age of 75 years old. So you can take it for the term until you're 80.
Okay. Well, Jill Joyce is asking the 1.1% interest rate, which really is quite exciting. How long could one get a mortgage for at that rate? Could you fix that for what sort of term?
That's on a variable rate, so it's a 12-month Euribor. A fixed rate, it depends on the term, how long you fix it for. So 5 years, it's the interest rate is around 1.5% for 5 years fixed.
Okay. And a few more questions about self-employed. What would you need to prove if you don't have your own pay slips as a self-employed person? Is it just a regular monthly income coming into your bank account? Would that suffice?
Yeah, that will suffice. And dividends, the bank also work on dividends. So if you don't pay yourself monthly or have pay slips, it's not a problem at all.
Okay. Beverly Fisher asks about the percentage you can borrow, but I think we have covered that. I guess you can't really roll in your purchase costs into that mortgage, can you? It's only based on the property value?
It's based on the purchase price. And the reason for that is because the bank, once we've got the approval and you've decided which bank you want to go ahead with, the bank contracts an independent evaluator to evaluate the property. So that would just be the property.
Okay, so the bank carries out evaluation same as in the UK, similar sort of process there. Okay, and David Matthews asked about a short-term mortgage for an early retiree with only pension as income. I guess that's fairly straightforward, is it?
That's, again, providing this proof, that's easy. Obviously, the depending on how they want to then repay the capital, becomes maybe a bit more complex if they want high repayments, because the banks here tend not to work on a sort of interest-only style mortgage. So you have to look at that a little bit more carefully. But yes, the banks are flexible. They want to lend money, and for them, mortgages are the best business around because they've got solid guarantees behind them, and so providing it stacks up from a business point of view, they'll look at it. As long as the client can back up what he's saying in terms of bank statements and so on, as Christina said, that they'll look at it. Some banks will say yes, some banks will say no, but they are keen to lend. Okay.
Christina, what about flexibility on overpayments? So we had on another webinar last week, I believe, the suggestion that one could overpay when the pound was at a better rate in exchange to the euro. Is there flexibility in products where you can make overpayment? Often in the UK, you're restricted to 10% of the value of the loan. What are the terms around that in Portugal?
There is, but by law in Portugal, there's an early repayment penalty fee. So on the variable rate, it's 0.5%. So as an example, for every 10,000 euros you pay off, the bank will charge you 50 euros. And on the fixed rate, it's 2%. So you can, but there's that penalty fee.
Okay, but is there an amount that you can pay each year? There isn't. Okay, there isn't that facility. Daniel Trenchfield, Christina asks about, is there any difference with applying for a mortgage in Madeira to Portugal?
No, not at all. Not at all.
No?
No.
And what about a mortgage offer and how long that might last? Obviously, with difficulties around travel at the moment, we have a question in from somebody anonymously asking how long the mortgage offer would last.
So what we do, we've got an inquiry form, and based on the information from that, we send it off to the banks. That's a pre-approval. So it's if you know the purchase price, we can work it out from that. If not, if you leave the purchase price blank, and we tell you how much the bank will be willing to finance. Once we start the application and it's approved, it's valid for 2 to 3 months, the actual approval.
2 to 3 months. So that would mean that you would need to complete within that period?
But it's also, Andy, it's also not a problem if it hasn't gone through, for example, or you're not ready to proceed. All we'll have to do is send the bank the updated documents and reapply. Okay.
Because there's obviously quite a few questions coming in about that. That one was from John Paul Cronin. And Teresa Arajo asks, do you foresee any changes in mortgage availability after Brexit?
Not at all.
No? I guess there's...
The bank wants to lend money.
Yeah, so there's two types of buyers typically, Chris, isn't there? There's people doing a permanent relocation, and there's a holiday home buyer. And okay, there might be a bit more complexity next year about getting residency, but for holiday home buyers, it's just going to be very sort of similar scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, people were buying property here before Portugal joined the common market, and when we still had exchange controls and everything. The paperwork may take a little bit longer, but it won't make any real difference, and it certainly won't affect things like ownership or titles or anything like that. It's just something else we have to overcome, and it won't. There's interest on both sides to keep it simple. You know, there's a lot of Portuguese living and working in the UK. There are a lot of Brits in Portugal, so both sides have an interest in making it work for each other.
Okay, a couple of questions about specific mortgage products, Christina, we have in the UK, such as buy-to-let mortgage. Does that exist in Portugal or not?
Not for the first purchase, because when the bank work out the affordability, they go on obviously your pay slips and your tax returns. But if you do purchase in Portugal and you rent it out and you declare it's all on your tax returns, for the second purchase, then they'll take that into account because it's classed as an income.
And what about offset mortgages? I don't know if you're familiar with those that we have in the UK, where you can have a current account offsetting against the mortgage balance. Is that a product that exists in Portugal?
I don't think so, Andy.
No. And what about, that was from George Harris. Thank you, George. And thank you, all of you. Lots of questions coming in. What about mortgage availability on land? I guess, Chris, that's somebody has an idea of potentially developing land themselves. Is that more difficult?
That's more difficult. The banks really want to see people doing it who are doing that type of transaction, having some real skin in the game, and therefore land is difficult. It's still possible, but it has to be quite a compelling case. And don't forget that then, if they need the mortgage for buying the land, probably means they need the mortgage for building the house, and so the bank's position gets a bit weakened. So they're not so keen on that, to be honest.
Okay. Christina, a question from a countryman of yours living in the UK, Felipe Afonso. I'm a Portuguese national living in the UK with no idea of Portuguese mortgages. I've heard of products for young adults up to 35 years. Is there such a product available? I can't find much information on this. Any information appreciated?
Is that for the term?
I think he's suggesting that there might be a specific product aimed at a younger buyer. Is that something that you've come across?
As Portuguese, he will be able to get a 90% finance, but the property has to be classed as his permanent residence.
Just say that again, sorry.
As Portuguese, the bank will finance 90% of the purchase price, but the property has to be classed as his permanent residence. Okay,
and then you get into tax resident, which jurisdiction you're in, which is a whole different ball game. Is there a minimum length of time you need to be self-employed in terms of proving your income to apply for a mortgage? That's a question from Annie. Thank you, Annie. Christina?
The bank requires 2 years business documents. So tax returns and bank statements.
2 years of statements. Okay, so that's quite a significant period. Chris, more generally, yeah, without banging on about all the obvious difficulties at the moment, what could somebody do to prepare themselves as a potential buyer? They're keen to buy in Portugal. They're keen to get out there as soon as they feel comfortable to do so. What sort of can they kick off this mortgage application process now? Is that something they could be ongoing?
Yes, they can do. We've had a client recently who's done everything remotely from Singapore. So all that is possible. They open the account remotely and everything. So the single most important step is obviously doing the research properly. The area you want, what you can afford, and that sort of, sorry, it's a plane just going. That is very important. Once that basic research is done, then you go to the next step. As Christina says, you can initiate the bank applications straight away, early in the process. So again, you know where you can go. And at some stage, you need to come out and have a look at the areas if you don't know them. Most of the buyers we have in the Algarve tend to know the area already and the area they want. So in some ways, getting to know the area is less important because they already know it. But you know, they want to come and have a look at the properties and so on. Obviously, using things like virtual tours and so on makes that process quicker and easier from a distance. But I think they're still important to come and have a look and make sure you like what you're getting involved in before you do.
Absolutely, yeah. Christina, David Matthews already has a property in Portugal, and he's looking to buy another one. He asks, are there any mortgage issues with this? I'm not quite sure what he means by that, but maybe could he remortgage a Portuguese property and take
equity release? You can do equity release, or if the property is rented, we can use that income as proof of income for the next purchase, or you can do equity release.
Okay. And somebody here says this might be a silly question. It's not a silly question. Christine, can you just talk through differences, if there are indeed, between getting a mortgage if you're relocating permanently to Portugal, getting a mortgage for a holiday home, or getting a mortgage to potentially rent out the property you're looking to buy in Portugal? Obviously, for that person, they're kind of different in their mind, but is there any difference in terms of the mortgage application?
There's no difference at all. There's no difference. The bank will finance 80% up to the age of 80 years old, and all we need is proof of income. As long as the affordability is there, it doesn't make a difference to the bank.
So it's quite a generous market at the moment then, Chris. I mean, we're doing a similar session on this for Spain, where the loan to value used to be 70%. It's now hard. It's sort of down to 60%. You can't bundle in your purchase costs, so that makes it about 50% net. It's really quite a generous regime at 80%, isn't it?
Yeah, we were lucky that in the financial crash, the banks here hadn't got so OTT as they did in Spain with the lending, the ratios. So they're still keen on the sort of 70–80%, because it's important for them to see that someone has their own interest in the property. But they are keen to lend, and they have got money, and so you know it is quite relatively easy to get the finance if your figures stack up. That's always the important thing. Right.
One really quick question, because it's very important, and we've not covered it yet. Somebody asks about the mortgages products that you referred to, Christina, and taking out life assurance. Are the premiums quite high for older purchasers? And is there a way around this? Do you have to take out life assurance?
The bank that finances 80% is the only bank that requires life insurance. But if you've already got an existing life insurance, we can apply with that policy. If not, then if you do require the 80%, you do need to take out the life insurance.
Okay, thank you. So the people to speak to are Chris Garvey at Chesterton's and Christina Guimarães at Ideal Homes Portugal. You should be able to see on my screen now, I believe, our event website, A Place in the Sun digital.co.uk, and you can head over here and meet all our Portuguese exhibitors. There you have Ideal Homes Portugal and Chesterton's Portugal, the two companies and taking part in this first session. So it's all back to back today. We have our second session starting in 7 minutes, which is about the legal process surrounding buying a property in Portugal. So Christina and Chris will be back later on for our general roundup session at the end of the day. But thank you both for taking the time out today to talk through mortgage availability in Portugal. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you shortly if you're interested in the legal side of buying a property in Portugal. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.